May Cress deftly manipulated the copper filaments inside Lady Thornfield's enchanted tea set. The porcelain teapot, decorated with hand-painted roses, whose petals actually unfurled when steeped with proper camellia leaves, sat incongruously on her grease-stained workbench. The magical core of the teapot had overheated, melting several of the interior mechanisms that regulated the temperature and animation spells. "Shoddy work," May muttered to herself, using a pair of fine-tipped tweezers to extract a blackened crystal that had cracked from thermal stress. Always with these B-grade crystals, even in luxury. What a waste of money. Her cramped workshop in the industrial district of Coryllis City's lower tier was a testament to her clientele's diversity and to the limits of her station. Shelves lined with jars of spare parts, gears of varying sizes, coils of different materials, crystals arranged by color and potency. A hodgepodge of magical artifacts in various states of disrepair occupied every surface. A clock whose hands moved backward on Wednesdays. A music box that played different melodies depending on the listener's mood. A pair of spectacles that translated foreign languages. Through the lone, soot-streaked window, the upper tier loomed above. A collection of elegant spires and floating pavilions, connected by translucent bridges that shimmered with protective enchantments. The constant hum of machinery from the factory surrounding her workshop provided a counterpoint to the distant, ethereal chimes that occasionally drifted down from above. May dabbed sweat from her brow, leaving a smudge of grease. At 28, her hands were already marked with the small scars and calluses of her trade. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and her clothes, sturdy canvas pants and a leather vest over a simple cotton shirt, were chosen for function rather than fashion. The only adornment she permitted herself was a jade pendant, a family heirloom from a mother she barely remembered. The teapot's inner chamber now lay fully exposed on her workbench. May leaned closer, examining the magical circuit with a jeweler's loupe. There it was. The flow regulator had been improperly installed at the factory, causing magical energy to back up in the resonance chamber rather than cycling through the system. A common enough flaw, but one that the upper-tier enchanters rarely bothered to check for during quality inspections. "Now I see you," she whispered, reaching for her precision soldering iron. This was where May excelled, in understanding the physical architecture that housed magical energies. As a null, born without the ability to channel magical energy, she could never craft the spells themselves, but she had developed an unparalleled understanding of how magic interacted with physical components. It was a talent that kept her employed in a world where magical ability determined just about everything. 2 hours later, the teapot was singing a perfect E-flat as she tested its enchantment with plain water. Lady Thornfield would be pleased, and, more importantly, would pay the 5 silver pieces May had quoted for the repair, enough to cover next month's workshop rent with a little left over. The bell above her door jingled, and May looked up to see her sister bursting into the workshop, her face flushed with excitement. "May! I got it! I actually got the position!" Lynn exclaimed, twirling in a circle, her simple dress flaring out around her ankles. At 20, Lynn shared May's dark eyes and high cheekbones, but where May's expression typically settled into focused concentration, Lynn's face was animated by a natural vivacity that even life in the lower tier couldn't dim. Like May, she had been born a null, but she had never shown interest in mechanical work, instead developing a talent for organization and anticipating others' needs. "The High Mage actually hired you?" May carefully set down Lady Thornfield's teapot and wiped her hands on a rag. "When do you start?" "Tomorrow morning!" Lynn spun again, her excitement palpable. "I'll be responsible for managing his personal quarters and study. The head housekeeper said he specifically requested someone with no magical interference, whatever that means. Apparently, some of his research is sensitive to ambient magical energies." May smiled at her sister's joy, but couldn't quite suppress a flicker of concern. High Mage Severian was known for his brilliant elemental magic, his collections of rare artifacts, and his capricious treatment of servants. A position in his household was certainly a step up from Lin's previous work at the textile factory, but it carried its own risks. "That's wonderful news," May said, deciding not to dampen Lin's moment with her worries. "The pay is as discussed?" "Even better," Lin beamed. 15 copper pieces daily, plus room and board. I'll be able to send you at least half of that, May. Maybe by next year we can afford to move to a better district." May embraced her sister. Since their parents had died in an industrial accident 9 years ago, she had done everything possible to provide for Lin, taking on the riskiest repair jobs and working through countless nights to ensure his sister could finish her basic education. The thought of Lin in the upper tier brought mixed emotions, pride in her achievement, hope for her future, and fear of her moving into a better world, where May couldn't protect her. "Just be careful up there," May said softly. "Those channelers, they don't always see us as people, Lin, especially the high-ranking ones." I know. Lin pulled back, her expression turning serious. "I'll be perfect, professional, invisible when I need to be. This is our chance, May. I won't mess it up." Before May could respond, another figure darkened the doorway. Tobias Garfinkel, hunched under the weight of a canvas sack slung over his shoulder. His weathered face broke into a grin when he saw the sisters. "G'day, sisters," he called, limping slightly as he navigated around cluttered workbenches. At 62, Tobias had spent most of his life scavenging discarded magical items from the upper tier's waste deposits, selling his findings to lower-tier mechanics like May. His gray hair was thin, but his eyes remained sharp, missing nothing of value among what the channelers thoughtlessly discarded. "What treasures have you brought today, Tobias?" May asked, moving to help him lower his sack to the floor. "Mostly the usual crap," he admitted, wiping his brow with a faded handkerchief. "Burnt-out illumination crystals, fraction wand cores. But this..." He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a device about the size of his palm. "This might interest you." May took the offered object, turning it over carefully in her hands. It appeared to be a communication device, similar to those used by administrative district councils. A center crystal array was surrounded by delicate silver filigree, with smaller crystals arranged in a complex pattern around the edges. The casing was cracked, and several of the crystals had come loose from their settings. "It's a long-range resonator," Tobias explained, noting her interest. "Upper-tier families use them to communicate between households. This one came from the South Waste Deposit, probably discarded after the magical surge last month damaged so many devices." May examined the crystalline array more closely. Unlike most magical communication devices, which relied on simple enchantments to transmit sound, the long-range resonator used crystalline resonance patterns to create a more stable connection. The principles were fascinating, almost like a physical manifestation of a spell's structure. "How much?" she asked, already mentally cataloging the components she could salvage. "For you? 3 copper pieces. The silver alone is worth that." May dug into her pocket and counted out the coins. It was more than she should spend on uncertain salvage, but something about the device's design intrigued her. "You're heading to the upper tier, I hear," Tobias said to Lin, as May carefully placed the resonator on her workbench. "Moving up in the world." Lin smiled. "Just for work. I'll still live down here, for now." "Be careful around those high mages," Tobias warned, his expression darkening. "I work maintenance in the administrative district for 30 years, before this lake gave out. Saw how they treat gnolls who get in their way." "Lin will be fine," May interjected, seeing her sister's smile falter. "She's smart, and she knows how to make herself valuable." Tobias nodded, but his eyes remained serious. "Let's hope so. Just remember what your father used to say. Keep your head down, your ears open, and your pockets empty," the sisters recited in unison, sharing a smile at the familiar advice of their late father. After Tobias left with a promise to bring any other interesting finds, Lynn helped May finish packing Lady Thornfield's repaired teapot for delivery. As they worked, Lynn chattered excitedly about her new position, while May offered practical advice about dealing with upper-tier employers. 2 weeks passed in a blur of routine. May repaired a steady stream of minor magical artifacts, while Lynn settled into her new position in High Mage Severian's household. During her weekly visits home, Lynn shared stories of the magnificent artifacts in the High Mage's collection and the complex politics of upper-tier domestic staff. She seemed to be thriving, her natural charm and efficiency making her a valued addition to the household. May spent her evenings tinkering with the resonator, fascinated by its construction. She had managed to repair the casing and reset the loose crystals, though, without magical ability, she couldn't restore its full functionality. Still, she had learned much about how magical energy flowed through crystalline structures, creating self-reinforcing patterns that could be manipulated and directed. It was well past midnight when a frantic knocking shattered the quiet of May's small apartment above her workshop. She jerked awake, momentarily disoriented, then rushed to the door, her mind immediately conjuring images of factory accidents or tenement fires, the common disasters of lower-tier life. Instead, she found Lynn on her doorstep, her face streaked with tears, her uniform rumpled as if she dressed in haste. "Lynn? What happened? Are you hurt?" May pulled her sister inside, scanning her for injuries. It's gone! Lynn gasped between sobs. "The singing bird, it's gone! And he thinks I took it!" "Slow down!" May guided Lynn to her small table, pouring her a cup of water from a pitcher. "What singing bird?" Lynn took a shuddering breath. "High Mage Severian had this jewel bird, a family heirloom. When magic flows through it, it sings different songs based on the owner's mood. It's worth a fortune!" She clutched the cup with trembling hands. "I cleaned his study today, just like always. The bird was there on its stand when I started. I swear it was. But when the High Mage returned this evening, it was missing." A cold dread settled in May's stomach. "And he accused you?" Lynn nodded miserably. "He said I was the only one who had been in the room, that his magical wards would have detected any other intruder. He wouldn't listen when I told him I hadn't touched it." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "He's reported me to the magistratum. Guards will come for me in the morning." May clenched her fist, a surge of rage coursing through her. "What's the penalty?" she asked, though she feared she already knew. 10 years in the work camps." Lynn's voice had shrunk to a whisper. May closed her eyes briefly. The work camps were notorious. The raw magical crystals mined there emitted toxic residue that slowly poisoned gnolls, who lacked the natural defenses that channelers possessed. Few survived more than 5 years of such work. "You're not going to any work camp," May stated flatly, her mind already racing through their options. "We have until morning. We could try to leave the city, head for the coastal provinces." "And live as fugitives forever?" Lynn shook her head. "They'd find us. Magic tracking is the first thing they teach in sorcerers, May." "Then we need to prove your innocence." May began pacing, her thoughts churning. "Could someone else have taken it? Another servant who might have had access?" "No one else entered the study. The wards would have recorded it." Lynn paused, then added hesitantly. Unless what?" "Unless it was another channeler," Lynn said slowly. "The High Mage's wards are key to detect gnolls and lower-level channelers, but they wouldn't necessarily register the magical signature of someone close to his own power level." May stopped pacing. "Does he have rivals? Enemies?" "Dozens." Lynn managed a weak smile despite her tears. "Upper-tier politics are vicious. But how does that help us? We can't accuse another High Mage without evidence." May resumed her pacing, desperate for a solution. They couldn't run, couldn't hide, and couldn't prove Lynn's innocence before morning. They needed more time, and leverage. Something to force High Mage Severian to back down or at least delay the proceedings. A memory stirred. Her father, years ago, telling stories of the old laws that governed conflicts between the tiers. Most had been rendered obsolete by modern magical governance, but some remained on the books, preserved by tradition and the upper tier's love of arcane protocols. The rite of contest, May whispered, the idea crystallizing in her mind. What? It's ancient law. Father mentioned it once. If a lower tier citizen believes they've been wrongly accused by a channeler, they can challenge their accuser to a formal duel. If they win, all charges are dismissed. Lynn stared at her in disbelief. A duel? A duel against a high mage? May, that's suicide. Even if they allowed it, we're gnolls. We can't cast spells. I know. May's mind was already racing ahead. But I need you to trust me. I have an idea. The magistratum loomed over the administrative district, a towering structure of obsidian and enchanted glass that caught the morning light and fractured it into unsettling patterns. It served as the physical and symbolic bridge between the upper and lower tiers, housing the courts and offices that administered Chrysalis City's complex laws. May and Lynn joined the queue of the lower tier petitioners, a line that sneaked out from the imposing bronze doors and down the marble steps. Most came to appeal tax assessments or request permits for minor magical usage in their businesses. Few left with the outcomes they sought. The sisters waited for 3 hours before being admitted to a small hearing chamber on the building's 3rd floor. The room was austere, with high ceilings and walls inscribed with magical sigils that gleamed faintly, recording every spoken word for later reference. A raised dais supported a single carved chair where Magistrate Ellery presided, a thin man with silver-streaked hair and the golden eyes that marked all channelers. To the magistrate's right stood High Mage Severian, resplendent in formal robes of midnight blue, embroidered with silver constellations that subtly shifted position. In his early 40s, he possessed the cold, perfect features of upper-tier aristocracy and an air of absolute authority. He barely glanced at the sisters as they entered, as if the matter was too trivial to command his full attention. Case 247, accusation of theft against one Lynn Crest, domestic servant, intoned the court scribe. Accuser, High Mage Orlin Severian of the 7th Circle. The stolen item is recorded as a melodic empathetic avian construct, family heirloom, valued at 2,000 gold pieces. May felt Lynn tremble beside her and squeezed her hand reassuringly. Magistrate Ellery gazed down at them with no emotion on his face. The charge has been registered, and evidence submitted by High Mage Severian. Do you confess to the theft, Lynn Crest, and submit to the prescribed sentence of 10 years in labor in the northern extraction camps? No, sir. Lynn's voice was barely audible. I didn't take it. I would never. The evidence is irrefutable, Severian interrupted, his tone dismissive. My wards recorded no other magical presence in my study during the relevant time period. The item was present when she began cleaning and absent when I returned. The logical conclusion is obvious, even to the most limited intellect. Rage flared in May's chest at his condescension, but she forced herself to remain outwardly calm. Emotional outbursts would only harm their case. Magistrate, she said, stepping forward. My sister is innocent. Perhaps there's another explanation. Could the item have been misplaced somewhere else in the household? Or could someone else have taken it? Someone the wards wouldn't recognize as the intruder. Severian's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of disdainful amusement. My wards are constructed with flawless precision, child. They would detect any unauthorized presence regardless of magical ability. Are you suggesting that I am somehow mistaken about the security of my own home? Or perhaps that I have falsely accused your sister for some nefarious purpose of my own? I'm suggesting that there might be explanations we haven't considered, May replied evenly, though her heart raced. My sister has no history of theft, No motive to steal an item she couldn't possibly sell or use, and nowhere to hide such a distinctive object. Lack of intelligence frequently leads to ill-conceived criminal acts, Severian said with a shrug. The motivations of gnolls are hardly complex enough to warrant extensive analysis. Magistrate Ellery raised a hand, silencing further arguments. While these points may have merit, the evidence presented is consistent with the requirements of our law. The magical words constitute binding testament, and no countervailing evidence has been offered. He lifted a small wooden gavel, preparing to pronounce sentence. Therefore, in accordance with Statute 54 of Criminal Code, I hereby sentence Lynn Crest to... I invoke the right to contest, May blurted, her voice cutting through the magistrate's pronouncement. The chamber fell silent. Even the magical sigils on the wall seemed to pulse with surprise. Magistrate Ellery slowly lowered his gavel, his expression shifting from bureaucratic indifference to startled curiosity. The right of contest, that statute has not been invoked in decades. Nevertheless, it remains law, May insisted, silently thanking her father for his insistence that she learn to read the legal codices. When a lower-tier citizen believes they have been wrongfully accused by a channeler, they may challenge their accuser to a formal duel. If victorious, all charges are dismissed. A ripple of whispers spread through the chamber as court officials and observers processed this unexpected development. Severian's perfect composure cracked slightly, revealing momentary confusion before his features settled into amused contempt. This is absurd, he said, addressing the magistrate rather than May. The right of contest presupposes that both parties are capable of magical combat. The woman is a gnoll. She cannot cast even the most elementary spell. This is merely a desperate attempt to delay the inevitable. Nonetheless, Magistrate Ellery replied slowly, the statute makes no specific mention of magical ability as a prerequisite. It simply states that the accused, or in this case, a family representative, may challenge the accuser to prove the truth of their claim through ritual combat. He turned to May, his golden eyes assessing. You understand that if you lose this contest, your sister's sentence will be doubled to 20 years? May nodded firmly. I understand. And you, High Mage Severian, do you accept this challenge, as is your right and obligation under the ancient laws of this city? Severian laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. How could I refuse such entertainment? I accept. Perhaps this will serve as a useful reminder to the lower tier of the natural order of things. Then it is decided. Magistrate Ellery struck his gavel on the sound block. The duel will take place tomorrow at dawn, at the official dueling grounds in the administrative district. 3 exchanges, victory by emancipation or surrender. No lethal force permitted. Court scribe, record this decision and issue the formal notifications to the duel marshal. As they left the magistratum, May's momentary triumph faded beneath the weight of what she had done. She had bought them the time, but at what cost? Without a miracle, tomorrow's duel would end with her injured or worse, and Lynn condemned to a slow death in the work camps. May, this is madness, Lynn whispered as they descended the marble steps. You can't fight a high mage. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should run while we have the chance. We wouldn't make it beyond the city walls, May replied grimly. Trust me, Lynn. I have a plan. Before Lynn could argue further, a thin figure in magistratum robes approached them, glancing furtively over his shoulder to ensure he wasn't observed. Miss Crest, the elderly clerk whispered, pressing a small scroll into May's hand. I cannot openly oppose a high mage, but I believe your sister is innocent. Severian has been suspected of illegal activities for some time. None have dared challenge him directly. May looked down at the scroll, its edges worn, and its seal faded with age. What is this? A basic defense spell. The simplest shield charm taught to first-year students at the academy. It won't be enough against Severian's power, but it's all I can offer. The clerk's rheumy eyes held genuine concern. Good luck, Miss Crest. Some of us will be watching with great interest. Before May could thank him, the clerk had melted back into the crowd streaming in and out of the magistratum. Back in her workshop, May carefully unrolled the scroll on her workbench, weighting its corners with small tools. The parchment was old, but well preserved, covered in precise magical notation, formal spell architecture rendered in flowing script and geometric diagrams. Lynn paced nervously behind her. Can you even read that? It's written in high arcane. Not the words, but the structures. May leaned closer, studying the patterns. Though she couldn't channel magic herself, years of repairing magical artifacts had given her an understanding of how magical energy moved through physical systems. The scroll's diagrams depicted energy flows, resonance points, and stabilization matrices, not unlike the mechanical systems she worked with daily. Her eyes widened as she recognized similarities between the shield spell's architecture and the crystalline resonance patterns in the resonator she'd been studying. The principles were parallel, energy channeled through specific pathways, creating self-reinforcing patterns that could be shaped and directed for specific purposes. I need materials, May muttered, already moving toward her shelves. What are you thinking? Lynn asked, following her sister's frantic movements with growing concern. May turned, her eyes bright with desperate inspiration. Magic is energy, Lynn. Channelers produce it naturally, direct it through their bodies. We can't do that. But what if we could store it? Absorb it? She held up the broken resonator. These crystals are designed to capture and channel magical energy in specific patterns. If I could adapt them, create a device that absorbs magical energy instead of just conducting it. You want to build a machine that can use magic? Lynn stared incredulously. In one night? Essentially, yes. But specifically, I think I can get it to redirect it. May was already clearing her workbench, laying out tools and components. I need you to go to Tobias. Ask him for every piece of crystal, an enchanted metal he can spare. Tell him it's life or death. As Lynn rushed out, May began dismantling every magical artifact in her possession, harvesting crystals, conductive metals, and regulatory components. The design took shape in her mind, a harness worn beneath her clothes with a central crystal array positioned over her chest to absorb magical energy, connected by conductive filaments to smaller crystal clusters at her wrists that could, theoretically, release that energy in controlled bursts. It was desperate, experimental, and probably doomed to failure. But as she worked through the night, meticulously assembling the device by lamplight, May clung to a slender hope. She wouldn't match a high mage's magical power, but perhaps she could turn that very power against him. Dawn painted the spires of Chrysalis City in hues of gold and rose as May and Lynn approached the dueling grounds. Located in the administrative district, the circular arena of white stone occupied a plaza between the Magistratum and the Academy of Magical Arts, a neutral territory in the complex political landscape of the city. A surprising number of spectators had gathered despite the early hour. Word of a gnoll challenging a high mage had spread overnight, drawing curious onlookers from both tiers. Upper-tier citizens and their finery stood at a careful distance from clusters of lower-tier workers who had delayed their morning commute to witness the unprecedented event. Beneath her plain clothes, May's device pressed uncomfortably against her skin. The entire contraption felt fragile and inadequate in the face of what she was about to attempt. Tobias limped toward them, his weathered face creased with worry. This is madness, May, he muttered. Severian won't show mercy just 'cause you're a woman, or a null. His pride just won't allow it. I'm counting on that pride, May replied. She squeezed Lynn's hand reassuringly. Stay with Tobias. Whatever happens. I love you. Lynn embraced her fiercely. This is all my fault. I should have never taken that position. None of this is your fault, May said firmly. Now hush. I need to focus. As she approached the arena's entrance, a tall figure in formal black robes intercepted her. Duel Marshal Renwick, a former combat mage who now oversaw all the dueling schools within the city. His silver hair was cropped short, and his face bore the distinctive scars of magical warfare. "Mechanic," he addressed her without preamble, "I'm required to ask once more, if you wish to withdraw your challenge. There would be no shame in recognizing the impracticality of your position." "I maintain my challenge," May replied steadily. Renwick nodded, unsurprised. "Then I must explain the protocols. The duel consists of 3 exchanges. As the challenged party, High Mage Severian will attack first, followed by your response. This constitutes 1 exchange. Victory is achieved through incapacitation or surrender. Should you become unable to continue or lose consciousness, I will immediately halt the duel and declare Severian the victor." "Understood." "I should also inform you," he added more quietly, "that while lethal force is prohibited, the definition of incapacitation allows considerable latitude. Wayward winds flow as they will. Prepare yourself accordingly." With that ominous warning, he gestured for May to enter the arena. The dueling grounds consisted of a circular platform 30 feet in diameter, surrounded by a waist-high barrier inscribed with protective enchantments to contain stray magical energies. Severian already stood at the far end, resplendent in dueling robes of crimson and gold that seemed to shimmer with power. A small group of upper-tier supporters flanked him, including several other high mages who had come to witness the spectacle. May took her position opposite him, acutely aware of the contrast they presented. A high mage in ceremonial splendor versus a mechanic in work clothes. Severian's lip curled into amusement as he surveyed his opponent. Marshal Renwick took his position at the edge of the circle. "The duel between High Mage Orland Severian and Mechanic Maycrest will now commence. First exchange! Begin!" Severian shifted with elegant movements, his hands weaving a complex pattern in the air. Golden light followed his fingertips, forming intricate symbols that pulsed with energy. "Let's start with something simple," he called, his voice carrying effortlessly across the arena. "A basic test of your preparations." With a fluid gesture, he released his spell. A vortex of flames erupted around May, spiraling upward in a tornado of red and orange fire that completely obscured her from the spectators' view. The heat was immediate and intense, searing her lungs with every breath. Instead of trying to escape the fiery column, May spread her arms wide, allowing the flames to wash over her. The pain was considerable, her exposed skin blistering from the heat, but she forced herself to remain still, concentrating on the device beneath her clothes. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then she felt it. A vibration against her chest as the central crystal array began to activate, absorbing the magical energy of Severian's attack. The crystals grew warm, then hot, storing the power that would otherwise have consumed her. The pain remained, but the flames that should have reduced her to ash merely singed her clothes and hair. As the fire dissipated, a collective gasp rose from the crowd. May stood relatively unharmed in the center of a circle of scorched stone, her clothes smoking, but her body intact. Severian's perfect features registered surprise, before settling into a calculating frown. "Interesting," he murmured. "Protective talisman, perhaps? No matter." Now came the moment of truth. For her response, May needed to release some of the stored energy before her device overloaded. She lifted her right arm, aiming at a point near Severian, but not directly at him. She pressed her thumb against the activation switch concealed in her palm. The crystals at her wrist flared with golden light as they discharged the stored energy in a chaotic burst that struck the arena floor 3 feet from Severian, blasting a small crater in the stone. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations. A null performing magic was unprecedented, incomprehensible. Severian's supporters murmured angrily among themselves, while from the lower tier section came tentative cheers. "Mechanical trickery!" one of Severian's fellow high mages shouted. "This violates the spirit of the duel!" Marshal Renwick raised a hand for silence. "The right of contest makes no specification regarding the methods employed. If High Mage Severian wishes to lodge a formal objection, he may do so now." Severian's eyes had narrowed, his initial shock hardening into determination. "No objection," he said coldly. "If the mechanic wishes to play with fire, I shall oblige her. Second exchange." This time, he abandoned showmanship for efficiency. His hands moved in sharp, aggressive gestures, golden eyes blazing with concentration. The spell he cast manifested as a wave of blue-white energy that engulfed May from head to toe, a paralysis spell, designed to lock every muscle in her body and end the duel instantly. Again, May's device activated, the crystals absorbing the magical energy. But the paralysis spell was more powerful than the fire had been, and her improvised contraption struggled to process the influx. Components beneath her clothes began to overheat, burning her skin where they pressed against it. A whine of stressed metal and crystal came from the central array as connections threatened to fail under the strain. May fell to one knee, fighting against both pain and the partial effects of the paralysis that seeped through her despite her device's efforts. Her muscles trembled with the strain of maintaining even this much movement. When the spell finally dissipated, she remained kneeling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Surrender now!" Severian called, "and I'll consider reducing your sister's sentence for the entertainment you've provided." May lifted her head, meeting his gaze across the arena. "Not finished yet," she managed through gritted teeth. For her second response, she raised both arms this time, directing the release through both wrist arrays to distribute the strain. The resulting blast was more focused than her first attempt, a golden beam that grazed Severian's shoulder, tearing his expensive robes and knocking him slightly off balance. He recovered quickly, but his expression had changed. The amusement was gone, replaced by something darker. Wounded pride and genuine anger. A high mage, touched by a null's attack, was an insult that demanded response. From the lower tier section of spectators came cheers and shouts of encouragement. Some factory workers had recognized May, and their calls carried her name across the dueling grounds. "Crest! Crest! Crest!" Severian's face flushed with humiliation as the chant grew louder. Marshal Renwick moved to begin the third exchange, but Severian gestured for him to wait, turning to confer briefly with his fellow high mages. When he faced May again, his golden eyes had taken on a dangerous gleam. "Final exchange," Marshal Renwick announced. "Begin!" Severian abandoned all pretense of restraint. His hands moved in complex, rapid patterns, drawing power not just from within himself, but from the ambient magical energy that permeated Chrysalis City. The air around him shimmered and distorted as he shaped his spell, a masterwork of elemental magic that manifested as hundreds of razor-sharp ice shards, each glinting in the morning sun as they hung suspended around him. With a single, contemptuous gesture, he sent them hurling toward May from all directions. May had no time to dodge, no hope of evading such a comprehensive attack. She could only stand her ground, arms spread wide, as the ice storm engulfed her. Her device activated instantly, the crystals glowing white-hot as they struggled to absorb the massive influx of magical energy. But there was simply too much power. The ice shards sliced through her clothes, cutting her face and arms, even as the central array absorbed their magical essence. The pain was overwhelming. May felt connections failing within her device, crystals cracking under the strain, metal filaments overheating to the point of melting against her skin. Still, she remained standing, drawing on reserves of determination she hadn't known she possessed. As the barrage finally ended, May swayed on her feet, blood streaming from dozens of cuts. Her device was critically overloaded, the central array pulsing with unstable energy that needed release before it exploded against her chest. She had seconds, at most. With the last of her strength, May brought her arms together, directing all the stored power into one final, desperate attack. The resulting blast was different from her previous attempts. Where those had been golden beams of pure magical energy, this was a chaotic storm of blue-white lightning that ripped across the arena in a deafening thunderclap. The explosion knocked everyone in the vicinity off their feet. A blinding flash of light obscured the dueling ground, forcing spectators to shield their eyes. When vision cleared, both May and Severian lay motionless on the scorched stone. For a long, tense moment, neither moved. Then Severian stirred, pushing himself to his knees, then to his feet. His immaculate robes were tattered, his perfect hair singed, but he stood triumphant, surveying his fallen opponent. "The duel is concluded," he announced, his voice hoarse but carrying. "The Null is defeated, as was inevitable." He turned toward Marshal Renwick, awaiting the official declaration of his victory. But as he moved, a strange expression crossed his face. He raised his hand, attempting to summon a simple light spell, a basic cantrip taught to children, and nothing happened. His second attempt proved equally futile. The golden glow of his eyes flickered and dimmed. "What? What have you done?" he gasped, staring at his hands in horror. Marshal Renwick approached cautiously, examining both duelists. May remained unconscious, her makeshift device a ruin of melted metal and shattered crystals. Severian stood, physically intact, but magically depleted. The backlash from May's final attack had temporarily disrupted his connection to magical energy. In a duel between channelers, such a condition was equivalent to incapacitation. The law was clear, though, the circumstances unprecedented. "The duel is concluded," Renwick announced, his authoritative voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Due to magical incapacitation, I declare Mechanic May Crest the victor by technical qualification." The lower-tier spectators erupted in cheers, while Severian supporters protested vehemently. The High Mage himself stood in stunned disbelief as Lynn and Tobias rushed to May's side, carefully lifting her unconscious form. "This is an outrage!" one of Severian's fellow High Mages shouted. "She used technological trickery, not true magic!" "The right of contest makes no such distinction, Severian," Renwick replied impassively. "The law requires only that the challenger render their accuser incapable of continuing the duel, which has occurred. All charges against Lynn Crest are hereby dismissed, as is required by ancient statute." As Severian stood amidst the ruins of his pride, Lynn and Tobias carried May from the arena, surrounded by cheering factory workers and mechanics who had just witnessed something they had never thought possible. A Null defeating a High Mage at his own game. May's first sensation upon waking was pain, a comprehensive, all-encompassing ache that seemed to reach every fiber of her being. The second was confusion, as she registered a ceiling that was not the familiar water-stained plaster of her apartment. "She's awake!" Lynn's voice came from somewhere nearby, followed by a flurry of movement. May blinked, her vision gradually sharpening. She lay in a small but clean room, sunlight filtering through a window with actual glass panes, rather than the oiled paper she used in her shop. Her body was wrapped in bandages, medicinal salves cooling the burns beneath. "Where?" Her voice emerged as a croak. "The Administrative District Medical Ward," Lynn explained, appearing at her bedside with a cup of water. "The court clerk, the one who gave you the scroll, he arranged it. Said it was the least they could do after what happened." May sipped gratefully, memories of the duel returning in disjointed flashes. "How long have I been unconscious?" 2 days, Lynn replied, gently adjusting May's pillows. "The healers weren't sure you'd survive the first night. The magical energy that passed through your body They said it should have killed you. That gnolls aren't supposed to channel that much power. The device? Destroyed. Melted right through your clothes in some places. Lynn's eyes filled with tears. But you won, May. You actually won. The charges against me were dismissed. I'm free. Before May could respond, the door opened to admit a middle-aged man in formal robes of a healer. A minor channeler whose magical talents manifested in medicine rather than combat or crafting. Ah, our miraculous patient is awake! He approached the bed, his expression a mixture of professional assessment and undisguised curiosity. How do you feel? Like I've been trampled by a herd of draft horses, May admitted. But alive! The healer nodded, checking her pulse and examining her pupils. The fact that you're alive at all is remarkable. The amount of magical energy that passed through your system would have killed most gnolls instantly. You must have an unusual natural resistance. Will there be lasting effects? May asked hesitantly. Hard to say. Your case is unprecedented. But the body is resilient, and you're young. With proper rest, I expect you'll recover fully. He hesitated, then added, though I would strongly advise against attempting similar feats in the future. Your device was ingenious, but fundamentally flawed. The next magical overload would almost certainly prove fatal. After the healer left, promising to return with pain medication, Lynn settled on the edge of May's bed. You've become something of a sensation, she said, a hint of wonder in her voice. The gnoll who defeated a high mage. Workers in the industrial district are calling it a miracle. Upper tier society is calling it a scandal. Either way, everyone's talking about it. May closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the implications. And Severian? His magic returned after a day, but his reputation? Lynn allowed herself a small, vindicative smile. Let's just say that being defeated by a null mechanic hasn't enhanced his standing among his peers. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rather than the healer, however, the visitor was from Magistrate Ellery, his silver-streaked hair and formal robes immediately identifying him, despite the absence of his official regalia. Miss Crest. He greeted May with a formal bow. I'm pleased to see you recovering. Your victory has caused quite a stir in legal circles. The right of contest hasn't been successfully invoked in 73 years. Never by a gnoll against a high mage. May struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain. I had no choice. My sister is innocent. Yes, I've begun to believe that might be the case. Ellery closed the door carefully before continuing in a lower voice. What I'm about to tell you is not official. Not yet. But I've been investigating the High Mage Severian for several months. There have been irregularities in his financial affairs. Valuable artifacts disappearing from private collections only to reappear in black markets of neighboring kingdoms. You think he stole his own singing bird? Lynn asked, eyes widening. And blamed the nearest convenient servant when he needed to explain its absence, Ellery confirmed. Unfortunately, proving such allegations against a high mage is extremely difficult. They are expert at covering their magical traces, and the word of a gnoll rarely carries weight against a channeler of Severian's rank. Until now, May observed. Indeed. Ellery's lips quirked in the ghost of a smile. Your victory, unconventional as it was, has created a unique opportunity, which brings me to my proposition. He moved closer, lowering his voice further. Your device, the one you used in the duel, crude but effective. With refinement, such technology could prove invaluable to the Magistratum's investigative division. We employ null agents precisely because they can move through magical environments without leaving their own signatures. But they've always been vulnerable to magical attacks and unable to operate in heavily warded areas. May's eyes narrowed with sudden understanding. You want me to make more devices? Improved versions, Ellery corrected, under official license and with proper resources. The ability to store and redirect magical energy could transform how we conduct investigations, particularly when dealing with magical crime in the upper tier. The implications were staggering. Such work would require access to materials and knowledge previously restricted to the upper tier. It would mean official recognition of her skills, a legitimate business rather than a struggling repair shop. What exactly are you proposing, Magistrate? A contract with the Magistratum, funding for research and development, a workshop in the administrative district, and a fair price for each functional device you produce. He named a sum that made both sisters' eyes widen. In return, you would grant me the Magistratum exclusive rights to the technology for a period of 5 years. And after those 5 years, the patents would revert to you, to use or license as you see fit. Ellery spread his hands. I won't pretend this offer is entirely altruistic. Your innovation threatens certain established interests. By bringing you under official sanction, we control the disruption your technology might cause while still benefiting from its application. But it also offers you protection, resources, and legitimacy that would be difficult to obtain otherwise. May exchanged a glance with Lynn, reading her sister's excitement. The opportunity was unprecedented, but it also meant becoming deeply entangled with the very system they had spent their lives navigating from the margins. I'll need time to consider, May said finally. And to recover. Ellery nodded, unsurprised. Of course. The offer will remain open. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Miss Crest. Whatever you decide regarding our proposal, you've already changed something fundamental in Chrysalis City. For the first time in generations, the upper tier has been forced to recognize that magical ability alone does not determine one's worth or potential. His eyes met hers with unexpected respect. That accomplishment may prove more significant than any device you might create. 6 months later, May stood in her new workshop in the administrative district, surveying her domain with a mixture of pride and lingering disbelief. The space was 3 times the size of her old repair shop, with high ceilings, proper ventilation, and equipment she once could only have dreamed of acquiring. Large windows admitted natural light, illuminating workbenches where 4 other mechanics, all gnolls from the lower tier, carefully assembled components according to her specifications. Her recovery had been slow but steady. The burns had healed, leaving only faint scars as reminders of that desperate gambit. Occasionally, she still experienced unusual sensations, tingling in her fingers when handling charged crystals, momentary dizziness near powerful enchantments, after effects of the massive magical energy that had coursed through her body during the duel. Delivery from Upper Central! Lynn announced, entering with a clipboard in hand. In her new role as business manager for what was now officially designated Crest Magical Engineering, Lynn had blossomed, revealing a talent for negotiation and administration that complemented May's technical expertise. The Grade A resonance crystals you requested, and another letter from the Academy of Practical Physics. May sighed, accepting the envelope. The Academy, a relatively progressive institution that focused on the physical properties of magic rather than its artistic or weapons implications, had been sending increasingly insistent invitations for her to lecture on her innovations. So far, she had declined, uncomfortable with the publicity and preferring to focus on perfecting her designs. Also, Tobias needs to see you, Lynn added with a smile. Says he's found something special in the South Waste Deposit. May nodded, grateful that some things hadn't changed. Tobias now officially supervised her supply chain, using his decades of scavenging experience to source rare components that even the Magistratum struggled to acquire through conventional channels. His network of lower-tier collectors provided a steady stream of discarded magical items that yielded unique parts unattainable elsewhere. The current project occupied the central workbench, a refined version of her original design. Smaller and far more efficient. Where her dual device had been a crude harness with exposed components, this was an elegant vest of thin, flexible materials with crystals and conductive filaments embedded within its layers. When worn beneath ordinary clothes, it was virtually undetectable. Every device was still painstakingly handcrafted and tested to ensure safety. The painful burns from her prototype had taught May the importance of proper insulation and energy distribution. Each new iteration incorporated lessons learned from previous versions, gradually transforming a desperate improvisation into a sophisticated technology. The Magistratum had kept its word, providing resources and protection while maintaining the confidentiality of her work. Officially, Crest Magical Engineering produced specialized investigative equipment for the administrative district. In reality, her devices had already been used to gather evidence against 2 upper-tier channelers involved in illegal enchantment trafficking, including, satisfyingly, High Mage Severian, whose mansion had been searched following his suspicious sale of several family heirlooms to foreign buyers. A messenger in administrative livery appeared at the workshop door, looking slightly nervous as he surveyed the unfamiliar equipment. "Mechanic Crest? Urgent communication for Magistrate Ellery." He handed over a sealed envelope bearing the Magistratum's official crest. The message inside was brief but momentous. The Council of High Mages had requested a formal demonstration of her technology at their next quarterly session. Some progressive council members had expressed interest in potential collaborations between traditional magic and mechanical innovation, while others wished to assess whether her work constituted a threat to established magical practices that should be more strictly regulated. May set the letter down slowly, its implications washing over her. 6 months ago, she had been a struggling repair mechanic in the lower tier, invisible to the powers that governed Chrysalis City. Now, those same powers were requesting her presence, not as a supplicant, but as an innovator whose work they could neither dismiss nor ignore. At a nearby workbench, one of her assistant mechanics was testing a new absorption matrix, carefully measuring the amount of magical energy a crystal could safely store before requiring release. The young woman, formerly a factory worker without prospects beyond decades of physical labor, handled the delicate equipment with growing confidence, her face intent with concentration. Similar scenes played out across the workshop. Knowles working with magical components in ways that had been thought impossible just months earlier. Not casting spells, not trying to become what they weren't, but finding their own path to interact with the fundamental energies that shaped their world. May moved to her private workstation, where her latest prototype waited. Unlike the Magistratum commission devices, this was a personal project. A small pendant designed to alert Knowles to dangerous levels of ambient magical energy in mining operations, potentially saving hundreds of lives in the crystal extraction camps where magical radiation slowly poisoned unprotected workers. As she activated the prototype, tiny crystals embedded in the pendant began to glow with a soft blue light, responding to the test enchantment she had set up. The light shifted to amber as she increased the magical field strength, then to red at levels that would be harmful with prolonged exposure. It worked perfectly, a small thing, perhaps, compared to the drastic developments of recent months, but no less meaningful. One more step toward a world where magical ability alone did not determine one's value or possibilities. May closed her hand around the pendant, feeling its gentle warmth against her palm. The path ahead remained uncertain. The Council of High Mages might embrace her innovations, or attempt to restrict them. The balance of power in Chrysalis City might shift dramatically, or resist change with all the considerable forces at its disposal. But as she looked around her workshop, at Lynn confidently directing operations, at Tobias sharing his hard-won knowledge with younger assistants, at Knowles working directly with magical energy for the first time in generations, May knew that something fundamental had already changed. A door had been opened that could never fully be closed again. And it had all begun with a desperate gambit, a broken communication device, and the determination to protect a sister from injustice. The device in her hand pulsed once, its crystals resonating with the ambient magic that filled the city. May smiled and returned to work, her mind already turning to the next improvement, the next possibility, the next step forward, in a journey that had only just begun.